My grandmother had only one rule for me in her house: never, ever touch the little wooden box in the attic. The day after her funeral, I broke that rule, and now I know she wasn't trying to keep me out, she was trying to keep something in. Her name was Elena, but I just called her Gran. She was the sweet-smelling, cookie-baking, story-reading cliché of a perfect grandmother. Her house, a rambling two-story Victorian on the outskirts of a sleepy Ohio town, was my sanctuary. Every summer, every Christmas, every long weekend was spent there. We were thick as thieves, Gran and I. Which is why the one rule always felt so jarring, a single sour note in an otherwise perfect symphony. The box itself wasn't much to look at. It sat on a dusty, forgotten shelf in the far corner of the attic, under a grimy round window that stared out at the weeping willow in the backyard like a cloudy, unblinking eye. It was small, maybe the size of a shoebox, carved from a dark, almost black wood, with intricate patterns of vines and flowers that seemed to writhe if you stared at them for too long. There was no lock, just a simple brass latch. "Mark, you can have the run of the place," she'd told me when I was about 8, her voice gentle but firm, her hand on my shoulder. "Explore every nook and cranny. But that box is not for you. Promise me." I promised, of course, and I kept that promise for 24 years. After the funeral, the house felt cavernously empty. The scent of her signature lavender and vanilla potpourri was already fading, being replaced by the musty smell of grief and disuse. Her lawyer had handed me the keys. The house, the savings, everything was mine. She had no other family. It was just us. My parents, her only child and his wife, had died in a car crash when I was 5, and Gran had stepped in without a second thought. For 2 days, I just drifted through the rooms, touching her things: the worn floral armchair where she'd read to me, the collection of ceramic thimbles on the mantelpiece, the faint, flowery handprint still visible on her apron hanging on the kitchen door. I was drowning in memories, and a part of me was desperate for one more piece of her, something I'd never known. That's what led me to the attic. The air up there was thick and hot, smelling of ancient dust and baked wood. A single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows. I made my way past stacks of old magazines, sheet-covered furniture that looked like sleeping ghosts, and boxes of my own childhood drawings. And there it was, sitting on its shelf, just as it always had been. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like a profound betrayal. But the grief was a physical weight, a hollow ache in my chest that demanded to be filled. Maybe, I thought, it held some letters from my grandfather, who died before I was born, or pictures of my mom as a little girl. Something personal she couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bear to throw away. I lifted it down. The wood was cool and smooth beneath my trembling fingers. It was heavier than it looked. Taking a deep, dusty breath, I flipped the brass latch. The lid creaked open, and for a moment I was just confused. The box was lined with faded red velvet, and nestled inside was a small collection of what looked like antique children's toys. There were maybe half a dozen of them. My first thought was disappointment. This was it. This was the big secret. But then I looked closer. The first thing I picked up was a little wooden soldier. It was beautifully carved and painted in a smart red uniform. But its face was the problem. The tiny mouth was stretched open in a silent, agonized scream, the painted blue eyes wide with a terror that felt chillingly real. It wasn't the heroic grimace of a soldier in battle, it was the raw, unadulterated horror of a man meeting a terrible end. My hand shook as I put it down. Next, I lifted out a porcelain doll. She was about 6 inches tall, with a pretty, cherubic face and a delicate lace dress. But as I turned her over in my hands, I realized her limbs were all wrong. Instead of the usual simple joints at the shoulders and hips, she had tiny, intricate ball joints at her elbows, knees, wrists, and ankles. Too many joints. It gave her a disturbingly spider-like quality, as if she could contort herself into shapes a doll never should. I felt a sudden, visceral urge to snap her limbs back into a normal position, but they were frozen, locked in a subtly unnatural pose. There was a spinning top, painted with cheerful circus animals. But among the prancing horses and smiling clowns was a single, monstrous figure, a shadowy, long-limbed creature with glowing white eyes, its form half hidden behind a tent flap. A set of wooden alphabet blocks had letters that were just slightly off, the too sharp, the S coiled like a serpent, and a little wind-up tin monkey, the kind that bangs cymbals together, had no cymbals. Its hands were empty, frozen in a grasping motion, and its painted-on smile seemed less cheerful and more like a predatory baring of teeth. I slammed the lid shut, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't a collection of cherished keepsakes. It was grotesque, a museum of wrongness. Why would my sweet, gentle Bran own something like this? Why would she hide it? Why would she forbid me from ever seeing it? That night I tried to put it out of my mind. I told myself it was just a collection of oddities, maybe something she'd inherited and found too bizarre to display but too sentimental to discard. I went to bed in my old childhood room, the familiar floral wallpaper and the faint glow of the street lamp outside doing little to soothe me. The whispering started around 3 a.m. At first, I thought it was the house settling, the old pipes groaning. It was a faint, sibilant sound like the rustle of dry leaves or sand trickling through an hourglass. I rolled over, pulling the pillow over my head, but the sound persisted, weaving its way through the cotton and into my ear. It wasn't the house. It was a voice. Or voices. Faint, childlike whispers, too indistinct to make out any words, but the cadence was unmistakable. It sounded like children telling secrets in the dark. I sat bolt upright, my skin crawling. The house was silent. The whispers had stopped. I strained my ears, listening until the silence itself seemed to hum. Nothing. I told myself I was dreaming, that grief and a dusty attic were playing tricks on my mind. But I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, a cold, nagging dread followed me around the house. I kept my distance from the attic door, focusing instead on the practical, mundane task of sorting through Gran's kitchen. But every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window panes, sounded like those whispers starting up again. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. My pragmatic side was at war with a primal fear that had taken root in my gut. I had to see the box again. I had to prove to myself that it was just a collection of weird old junk and that the whispers were a figment of my imagination. This time, when I opened the box, my blood ran cold. They had moved. I was sure of it. I have a good memory, a detail-oriented mind. It's part of my job as an architect. I remembered exactly how I'd put them back: the screaming soldier on the left, the doll in the middle, the monkey on the right. Now they were rearranged. The doll with too many joints was propped against the side of the box. The screaming soldier lay on its back in front of her, and the tin monkey stood over him, its empty hands reaching down toward the soldier's horrified face. It was a tableau, a grim, silent play. It looked like an interrogation or a torture. I stared, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. It was impossible. I must have been mistaken. I must have put them back this way and forgotten. But I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I hadn't. I slammed the lid shut again, harder this time. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the latch. I didn't just put the box back on the shelf. I shoved it behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines, burying it. Out of sight, out of mind. Right? Wrong. The whispering that night was louder. It wasn't just a faint rustle anymore. It was clearer, and it was coming from the direction of the attic stairs. It still sounded like children, but there was a cruel, mocking edge to the tone. Sometimes it would rise in pitch, a high, thin sound like a stifled giggle, and my entire body would break out in a cold sweat. I spent the night huddled under my blankets, my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over 911. What would I say? There are creepy toys whispering in my attic. They'd send a psychiatric evaluation team, not a SWAT team. The following days were a slow descent into madness. Every time I left the house and came back, I'd find some small, inexplicable change. A teacup moved from the saucer to the middle of the kitchen table. A book pulled halfway out of the bookshelf, its title ominous: The Bad Seed. They were small things, things I could almost convince myself I'd done and forgotten. But I knew it wasn't me. The nights were the worst. The whispers were becoming words. Single, sharp syllables hissed from the shadows. Bad, cold, mine. One night I woke up to a sound from downstairs. A rhythmic thump thump thump. It was slow, deliberate. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I crept out of bed and to the top of the stairs, peering down into the darkness of the living room. In the faint moonlight filtering through the bay window, I could see it. One of the alphabet blocks. It was on the floor, in the middle of the Persian rug. As I watched, it flipped over. Thump. It was the block with a S that looked like a snake. Then another block, which I hadn't even seen, flipped over next to it. Thump. N-O. They were spelling something. I didn't wait to see the rest. I scrambled back into my room and barricaded the door with a chair. I sat with my back against the door, listening to the soft, intermittent thump 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 from downstairs until the sun came up. I was losing my mind. My sentimental, pragmatic mind was fracturing under the strain. I was torn between the memory of the woman who raised me, the woman who baked me apple pies and taught me how to ride a bike, and the horrifying possibility that she had knowingly kept this evil in her house. In my house. I had to know. I spent the next day tearing the house apart, looking for answers. I went through her desk, her closets, her photo albums. Nothing. It was all just normal. Pictures of me on my first day of school, report cards, birthday cards I'd sent her. There was no hint of anything sinister. Finally, I found a small, leather-bound diary tucked away in the back of her wardrobe. It wasn't locked. Her handwriting was a familiar, elegant script. The early entries were exactly what I'd expect: notes about her garden, church bake sales, and how proud she was of me. I flipped toward the end. The last entry was dated just a week before she died. The whispers are getting stronger again. I can hear them, even from downstairs. They're restless. After all these years, they're still so angry. I fear my strength is failing. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep them quiet. I'm so sorry, Mark. I should have told you. I should have destroyed it. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. My blood turned to ice. She knew. She'd been living with this, fighting this, my entire life. The rule, the secret wasn't about keeping me from the box. It was about protecting me. I went back to the attic, my fear now mingled with a strange sense of resolve. I wasn't just scared anymore, I was angry. Angry at whatever this thing was that had tormented the woman I loved. I pulled the box out from behind the magazines and opened it. The tableau inside was new. All the toys were arranged in a semicircle, facing the center of the box. In the middle, the little tin monkey lay on its back, and the other toys they were posed as if they were stomping on it, tearing at it. The doll's foot was on its chest, her oddly jointed limbs bent at a vicious angle. The screaming soldier's bayonet was pointed at the monkey's throat. The alphabet blocks were scattered around it, spelling out one word: ours. A wave of cold washed over me, so intense it felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. And the whispers started, not from the hallway this time, but from right in front of me. From the box. He told, one childish voice hissed. Told her, whispered another. Bad boy, a third giggled, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. We stopped him. My mind reeled, trying to piece it together. A dark family secret. Grim tableaus. My grandmother's diary. A thought, monstrous and unthinkable, began to form in my head. I thought back to the few stories Gran had told me about her childhood. She'd had siblings. A younger brother and sister. They'd died young, she'd said. A terrible fever that swept through the town. She never liked talking about it. I grabbed my laptop and, with shaking hands, started searching old newspaper archives for the town. I typed in my grandmother's maiden name and the approximate years. It took a while, but then I found it. A headline from a local paper dated 1943. Tragedy strikes local family. 2 children dead in barn fire. The article was brief. Elena, aged 10, had been playing with her younger siblings, 6-year-old twins named Sarah and Samuel, near the family barn. A fire had started. Elena had managed to escape. The twins had not. The cause was undetermined, but faulty wiring was suspected. Elena was the sole witness. Sarah and Samuel, S&S, the letters on the blocks. He told. Samuel told her, told my great-grandmother about something. The toys, a doll for Sarah, a soldier for Samuel, and the monkey, who was the monkey, maybe another child, a friend, the one they were punishing in the box. The whispers from the box grew louder, more insistent. She left us. Locked us in. It was dark. So hot. The barn fire. It wasn't an accident. My throat constricted. I looked from the newspaper article on my screen to the ornate wooden box. Elena, my sweet, kind gran, had been 10 years old. What happened in that barn? Did she lock them in? Did they do something to the monkey child? And Samuel told, and in a fit of rage or fear, she trapped them. And the toys, were they representations of the children she'd lost? Or something more? Were they vessels, containers for their spiteful, angry spirits? The temperature in the attic dropped another 10 degrees. I could see my breath misting in the air. The whispers were swirling around me now, a vortex of childish malice. Let us out. We want to play. Play with Mark. The doll's head slowly, impossibly, began to turn, its painted eyes fixing on me. Its porcelain smile seemed to widen. This was it. The choice. My grandmother had failed to destroy it. She couldn't bring herself to sever that last, horrific connection to her siblings. But she had kept them contained. Now she was gone. And they were getting stronger. My pragmatic mind screamed at me to slam the lid, take the box outside, and burn it until there was nothing left but ash. Burn the memory. Burn the secret. But my sentimental heart, the part of me that was still grieving the woman who raised me, hesitated. This was her burden, her secret. Destroying it felt like erasing the last, most hidden part of her. It felt like a betrayal of her memory, her struggle. And a darker thought slithered into my mind. What if destroying the box didn't destroy them? What if it just set them free? The doll's head completed its turn. The tin monkey's arm twitched. The screaming soldier seemed to push itself up a fraction of an inch. "She's gone now, Mark," Sarah's voice hissed from the box, clearer than ever before. "You're ours." I made my choice. I didn't burn the box. I couldn't. Instead, I did the only other thing I could think of. I reinforced my grandmother's prison. I took the box to my workshop in the garage. My hands were steady now, fueled by adrenaline and a cold, terrifying purpose. I wrapped the entire box in heavy-duty chains, pulling them so tight the wood groaned. I secured them with 3 separate padlocks. Then, I mixed a batch of high-strength concrete in a large plastic tub. I placed the chained box in the center and poured the concrete over it, layer by layer, until it was completely submerged in a gray, soupy tomb. It took 2 days to fully cure. For those 2 days, the whispers in the house were frantic, enraged. I heard scratching sounds from the garage, high-pitched shrieks that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and waiting. By the 3rd day, the block of concrete was a solid, immovable monument of gray. And the house was silent. For the first time since the funeral, truly silent. It's been 6 months now. The block of concrete sits in the corner of my garage. Sometimes, when I'm out there late at night, I think I can feel a faint vibration coming from it. A deep, cold humming. And on quiet nights, if I listen very, very closely, I can almost hear it. Faint, so faint it might just be the wind. Childlike whispers. I never found out what really happened in that barn. I never learned who the monkey was supposed to be. I live with the silence and the knowledge of what it's holding back. Gran couldn't destroy the box, and neither could I. We're keepers, she and I. Wardens of a dark family secret. She passed the burden on to me. And now I sit in her quiet, empty house, and I wonder who I will pass it to when I'm gone. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.